Stuck. Unable to move, set in a position that you can't get out of or away from. Now imagine that position is through someone's windshield. You're badly injured and unable to help yourself. As bad as that sounds, now imagine that despite the fact you could be saved, you've instead been left alone to die. If this plot sounds familiar, it's likely because you've seen this played out on crime shows such as CSI, Law & Order and Fargo. You may have also seen the 2007 film Stuck. Plots like this sound so far-fetched. Writers would have you believe that it's a work of fiction, but you might be appalled to learn that true events were the source of inspiration. I'm Lauren, and this is The Truth Inside, the terrifying true story of Gregory Biggs. It was the early hours of Friday, October the 26th, 2001. Chante Mallard had not long climbed into her Chevrolet Cavalier to drive home following a night of partying. At the age of 25, she had been enjoying a night of fun at a friend's apartment before continuing the party at a local nightclub. She knew that she shouldn't really be behind the wheel. She'd been drinking heavily and had taken both cannabis and ecstasy during the night. But, she reasoned, she'd done fine so far and was less than a mile from home. How she was wrong. Without warning, she collided with a man. She hit him with such speed that the man became embedded in her windshield. He was lodged halfway through the glass. Horrified, Chante stopped the car and attempted to dislodge the man, but without any success. He was far too heavy for her to push him off. What should she do? She knew she was at fault. She should never have been driving and she was likely to face some serious consequences. But she had a stranger hanging from the front of her car, in desperate need of medical attention. It was the decision Chante made here that would change the course of her life and the stranger's life forever. Chante got back into the car and drove the remaining way home. The stranger still stuck to her windshield, his head and shoulders hanging inside of the car. She parked the car up in the garage, got out and closed everything up behind her. She took one look at the stranger before heading inside, the stranger begging for help. Despite bleeding heavily, he was in fact still alive. Chante was a nurse's aide, so she knew he was in dire need of medical assistance. Despite this, Chante claims that over the next few hours she went back inside the garage to check on the man. Not to aid him, but to check if he was dead. It was during this time she also called a friend, T, whom she'd been out with earlier on in the night. When T found out what had happened, she encouraged Chante to call 911, but to no avail. T left, stating she wanted nothing to do with the situation. Chante said that over the course of the next few hours, she apologised profusely to the stranger, but never made any attempt to save him or call for help. Eventually, the stranger did as Chante hoped. He fell unconscious, bled out, and died. The injuries he sustained in the collision taking his life. The next day, Chante knew she had to get rid of the body and sought help from her ex-boyfriend, 𝗥𝗲𝘀cie𝘂𝗿𝗀. He came over at approximately 9 a.m, where he found the mangled body hanging out of the car. Jackson called upon his cousin Tyrone Cleveland for additional help, and together they waited for darkness to fall before transporting the body to Cobb Park. Cobb Park was the ultimate destination where they dumped the body. Parts of Chante's car were also set alight at this point to try and hide additional evidence. This attempt to hide the body was short-lived. On October the 27th at approximately 9:40 a.m, two men stumbled upon the body. When the police viewed the body, they noticed the victim's shoes and socks were missing, and this, alongside the injuries he had sustained, led them to believe he was a victim of a hit and run. Taking note that blood wasn't present at the scene, revealing that the body had in fact been moved. The police could also not establish any motive. On the body, a wallet and identification had been found. Nothing appeared to have been taken. An autopsy later revealed that the victim's left leg had almost been amputated, which ultimately resulted in severe blood loss that claimed his life. The medical examiner also concluded that the victim had died several hours after he was hit. So who was the victim? Gregory Biggs was 37 years old when he was walking along the highway before being struck by Chante. Unfortunately, Gregory was homeless at the time, after going through a rough period in his life. but he was making his way back to a temporary day resource centre on East Lancaster Avenue. He had been in a relationship with a woman and had moved in with her, but unfortunately she had fallen into some financial troubles. Being the type of generous person he was, Gregory, a self-employed bricklayer at the time, wanted to help and so loaned her money. However, in doing so, he eventually found he wasn't able to make back relevant payments on his truck. The truck he relied upon for work and was eventually repossessed. His inability to provide for himself financially had a knock-on mental health impact, something that Gregory already had to monitor carefully. He'd suffered from mental illness since he was a teenager, having previously been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, and he relied on medication to manage these effectively. Without the money to be able to buy this medication, his mental health began to decline, and this impacted his ability to obtain another job. This vicious circle resulted in him losing his home, which is why he found himself walking back to a temporary shelter that fateful night. At the time he was struck by Chante, despite living in a shelter, he was on the up. He'd started working construction jobs as a mason. His mother Meredith said he was on an upswing, he was getting back to a good life. Unfortunately, this was never to be. Gregory left behind a son, Brandon, and whilst they hadn't spoken for 2 months prior to the accident, he said that his dad was very hard-working, friendly, a caring guy. He liked to do things together, go see movies or go to the mall. Despite Gregory and his mother divorcing when he was very young, he said he saw his father for bi-weekly visits on the weekend, and his father also attended his high school athletic events. Brandon had also lived with his father for a period of time, almost a year, and they had a good relationship. He was leaving behind people that cared about him deeply. It's now 4 months after the tragic events. After disposing of Gregory's body, Chante continued on with her life as normal. Hit-and-run cases are very challenging cases for the police, and the Fort Worth Police Department had no leads. That was until police received a call from a woman who said she might have information relating to the crime. The woman, Miranda Daniel, was an acquaintance of Chante, and during a party, Chante had made some concerning statements about hitting a white man. Police acted on the lead, obtaining a search warrant and bringing Chante in for questioning. Upon entering her home, they found her car in the garage with significant damage, namely to the hood of and front bumper. Additionally, the windscreen was missing entirely. The concrete floor of the garage was covered in a pool of dried blood. Homicide was definitely looking like the only likely explanation. There was also blood and hair found on the bumper of Chante's car. The seats of the vehicle were also found in the garden with extensive fire damage. It was clear Chante was trying to get rid of evidence that may incriminate her. On February the 26th, 2002, Chante was arrested and charged, initially for failing to stop and render aid, but this was quickly upgraded to murder alongside evidence tampering. The 2 men that helped were also arrested and charged. Both pled guilty and received 10 years, agreeing to testify against Chante in the process. Chante Mallard herself pled guilty to tampering with evidence, so that was burning the car seats, but pleaded not guilty to murder. She apologised to the court and directly to the Biggs family. "I've ruined lives of other people. I'm sorry for what I've caused your family, and I'm sorry for the pain I've put my family through. I'm sorry for what I have done to society." So why did Chante plead not guilty? And why did she not help Gregory that night? Well, according to her defence, it comes down to the simple fact that she never intended to kill Gregory. It was an accident. And that she was in an altered state of mind at the time. She was scared, really scared. She just didn't know what to do. But is this true? During the trial, one of the chief witnesses was Chante's best friend, 𝗥𝗲𝘀cie Fry, also known as T. T testified that on the night of October the 25th, 2001, she and Chante had split a tab of ecstasy whilst at her apartment, quoting, "She said she wanted to try it, and I told her just to take half because it was her first time." The two then went to a club in Arlington. The club was offering 69-cent drinks that night, which meant that they were both intoxicated. They also both smoked cannabis whilst they were together, before T drove Chante's car back home to her apartment. Once T was back home, Chante got into the driver's seat to make her own way back home when the tragedy occurred. T testified that Chante, who was her best friend, had called her about 3:30 a.m. begging T to pick her up. T said when she arrived at her friend's house, Chante had ran to the car, sobbing uncontrollably. T testified that as she drove around, her friend told her what had happened. After driving round for about an hour, the women returned to the house, where T went into the opening of the garage and saw Gregory. I saw her car parked in the garage and the backside of a body hanging, lodged out of the window. She said, I ran back inside and said, you need to do something, call 911. When Chante refused, T said the two argued for a few minutes, with T telling her, I told her I'm leaving. I don't want anything to do with this at all. T left the scene. So Chante was urged to call for help, but failed to do this. The reason her defence said, and please watch the full opening arguments from both sides on court TV, the sources are down in the description, was because it was dark, and to many it became the darkest night of all. She was in an altered state. Her mind was challenged with alcohol, marijuana and a drug called ecstasy, when suddenly a 200-pound body with sound and terror comes crashing through the windshield of her car. A body is there, glass is shattering, slithers of glass are flying. Glass is flying into her face, her hair, her car, her skin. No one can describe that feeling. The quiet of the night turns into the roar of a wind tunnel. You can't imagine. There's no question that she went straight to her house. There's no question when she got there she was alone. There's no question she closed the garage door. You know what happened. She started crying hysterically and telling this body in her car, I'm sorry, it was an accident. I didn't mean to hit you. I didn't mean to hurt you. No one can tell you what that would be like. She was hysterical, terrified and confused. Despite the defence, Chante was convicted of murder and of tampering with evidence. She received 50 years for murder and 10 for the tampering sentence, both to run concurrently. She will be eligible for parole in 2027. I said at the start that the story might sound familiar, not necessarily because you'd heard of Gregory's murder, but due to the fact this story has been played out in popular media, including the 2007 film, titled Stuck. The film's core plot centres around Brandy, a retirement home caregiver who's up for promotion at work. After a night of drinking and celebrations, she drives home, only to hit a man called Tom. The collision results in him becoming trapped in the car's windshield. Brandy drives home, reassuring Tom she'll call for help, but she begins to debate the issue. She feels as though the accident will destroy her life and career, and as a result she leaves him in the garage to die. The plot deviates from here, and I won't share any spoilers, but it's clear where the inspiration came from. As mentioned, other shows have done similar. There was a significant plotline in season 2 of the television show Fargo surrounding the death of a character after becoming embedded in a windshield of a car. It's not often, as I look into true stories that inspired books, television shows and films, that I'm genuinely surprised. But when I came across this example, I did a double take. It almost sounds too implausible to be true. It's true when they say Chante Mallard must have been in shock when the accident occurred, and I can understand she must have been terrified. She must have been thinking about the potential consequences of her actions. I can't reconcile the fact that she drove home with another human being attached to her car, and was willing and able just to close the door behind her and wait for him to die. Gregory might have been down on his luck, but he pleaded for help and could have survived had she obtained that for him. Was she a monster, or had the combination of drink and drugs impacted her ability to make decisions and act responsibly? Who knows? I'm not often speechless, so I'll let the words of Tarrant County Assistant District Attorney Richard Alpert sum it up for me. I'm going to have to come up with a new word. Indifferent isn't enough. Cruel isn't enough to say. Heartless, inhumane, maybe we've just redefined inhumanity here. Thank you for joining me. Take care. Thank you for joining me as we discuss the truth inside true crime, mysteries and legends from around the world. As terrifying or as uncomfortable as the truth may be, as Theodore Roosevelt once said, in the end the most unpleasant truth is a safer companion than a pleasant falsehood. Until next time. Hi everyone, Lauren here. Thank you for watching or listening. If you've got a case or a mystery that you'd like to suggest, please email me at thetruthinsidepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks.